was, I would say, like a godsend for the community.
The place always seems to be hopping.
This was a place to find out how to survive.
First time I was in the hall, my mother had just given birth to me and was coming home and came into the hall first.
When you look at what was done largely by volunteers out of an impoverished immigrant group, and just one fraction of it, and what they were able to accomplish is nothing short of remarkable.
In Winnipeg, the Ukrainian began to arrive in large numbers right around the end of the 19th century. They settled largely in the North End.
As immigrants, it could be very difficult for Ukrainians to become involved in mainstream Canadian political life, often because of the language barrier, certainly because of cultural barriers.
The level of hostility, the things that are said in newspaper editorials would never be printed nowadays. I mean, you think of the nasty term and it's applied to the Ukrainians. It makes it all the more remarkable at how successful some of these Eastern European groups, particularly the Ukrainians, become.
The Ukrainians, like just about all immigrants, tended to form their own clubs and organizations. Some of them were religious-based. But there were also very large, more secular kinds of organizations and clubs. It was in these groups, in these political and cultural groups, that one finds the origins of the Ukrainian Labor Temple.
The Ukrainian Social Democratic Party, a branch of it, a branch of the left-wing Ukrainian newspaper, and one of the dramatic societies got together and decided that they need a hall.
They said, we're renting space to put on dramas, we're renting printing presses to print our newspaper, and we're renting space to meet at. Why don't we build something of our own?
Most major training centers had labor temples.
A labor temple is basically a gathering space for those who are oriented towards advocating for rights and dignity for working people.
The Ukrainian Labor Temple movement really does get going in Winnipeg. The decision was made in March of 1918. They're going to go ahead with this. And they're going to do it all based on voluntary contributions.
There are so many stories that I came across of women and men doing a full workday and in very heavy labor in many cases, very difficult jobs, and then coming in and spending their evenings and any other time off that they might have had in building the labor temple.
It was in place and constructed completely within a little over a year. And given the size of the edifice and the fact that they were trying to come up with the money any way they could and using volunteer labor, it's really quite amazing they got it all done. This hall and the leadership that surrounds it are going to inspire and help to organize Ukrainians all across the country.
Once this hall was built and it was reported on in the newspaper, other communities saw what could be done, they began building their own labor temples.
The hall was such a hub of activity in the 1920s and 1930s.
Every night of the week, you would find things going on. There were major concerts on the weekends. Dramatic productions were very, very popular.
The drama was quite extensive. Quite a few of the early drama productions required group singing and instrumental accompaniment. This actually prompted the development of choral and orchestral work in the association.
The hall would fill up when there was a play or a concert, and that they would end up turning away some 200 or 300 people on some nights. So it was really incredible how popular the activities were here and how anxious people were, how hungry people were for those kinds of activities. Ukrainian language classes were very popular for children and youth. English language classes were held for adults who wanted to improve their English. There were literacy classes. Folk dancing was popular. Even during the Depression, the hall was quite vibrant. The sheer volume of activity that went on in these halls in the 20s and the 30s, and particularly in this hall in Winnipeg, was so remarkable. And I'm fascinated by the efforts that the leaders went to ensure that they were engaging community members in ways that spoke to those community members' experiences.
The Labor Temple was absolutely crucial in this process of helping to maintain and develop a Ukrainian Canadian culture. By the mid-20s, you've got, 8 or 9 different publications being run out of the basement of this hall.
The press was really critical to building the movement because many of the members and supporters of the Ukrainian Labor Temple movement in Canada were not living in urban centers where the halls were. It could be very difficult to be involved with a hall because they would have to travel great distances. So the newspapers were very important in building that movement, in linking members together, and informing them what was going on.
But they're also increasing all of the cultural activities. There's more papers, more magazines going out. The mandolin orchestra is touring across Canada. Then you create the Workers' Benevolent Association that becomes a nationwide sick benefit society. And then in the late 20s, it's like, we're not doing enough, so let's do some more. And so they create what's going to be the foundation of the People's Co-op. And they also, at the same time, they decide that they're going to buy this old former country club out at Parkdale and turn it into an old folks' home and an orphanage. The energy level was absolutely amazing. They were convinced they were going to change the world, change it in a much better way.
The hall was an important site for political activism, and often this extended beyond the building itself.
It was a working class based organization. And of course, we were concerned of making for better condition for these workers. Why not? It's not the sole property of one or another political party.
The leaders of the Labor Temple and many rank-and-file members were closely connected to the Communist Party of Canada, but their relationship with the party was often a difficult one. While the party critiqued the Labor Temples for the amount of cultural and artistic activities in which their members engaged,
the party even went so far as to say that you should stop this business of culture and choirs and orchestras and dances and strictly be political. Well, no, the leading members said no, and there was that antagonism. That antagonism lasted even after the Second World War, right to the very end, that antagonism. By the time 1939 came about, there were over 100 drama groups, over 100 choirs, over 100 orchestras, over 300 branches of the association in Canada.
World War II was a watershed event for the members of this hall.
Initially, the leadership of the Communist Party of Canada came out and said, wow, we're completely in support of this. And then, just 1 or 2 days later, it's revealed that the Soviet Union has signed the non-aggression pact with Germany.
And the Ukrainian leadership at the Labor Temple supported the position of the International Communist Movement. This led them immediately to be placed under suspicion by the Canadian state.
Many of the most senior leaders of the Labor Temple movement are interned.
It was 6 o'clock in the morning, and my mother came and woke me up and said, come on, you got to say goodbye to Daddy because he's going out. And my father came up and said, everything's going to be okay. You look after your mother. He was speaking in Ukrainian. Te dohľaдай mamu. Okay, so, and that was it.
The federal government confiscated and shut down the halls across Canada, and in many cases they sold them or rented them to Ukrainian nationalist organizations. So it was multiple slaps in the face, so to speak, for the Ukrainian Labor Temple movement.
What do you think about it? The Depression couldn't put this place down. It actually took official government action to shut it down, and action that was, I think, pretty clearly a violation of people's civil liberties.
No crimes were committed. Nobody was accused. My father wasn't accused of any kind of a crime. It was an order in council. And an order in council requires no justification.
What kept the organization going was the work of its female members in many cases, because the RCMP, in the surveillance of this organization and in the determinations that were made of how to shut down this organization for good, it was just assumed that, if you round up their leaders and intern them, that will shut down the organization. They failed to note that its women members were actually a critical force in keeping the organization going. The Canadian government gave the reason that the men were interned because of their ties to the Soviet Union. But even after the Soviets became an ally with Hitler's attack on the Soviet Union on June 22nd of 1941, the men remained interned for another year. The internment ended in the fall of 1942.
The Ukrainians who had been in prison were released, and a number of them actually joined the Canadian military.
The orchestra was going out to the various army camps to entertain the troops.
Many of the concerts and other cultural activities in which they were engaged were direct fundraisers for the Red Cross, for other relief organizations, and to support the troops overseas. So they worked very hard to demonstrate loyalty to Canada and loyalty to the war effort.
Ownership was restored with the end of the war.
In the late 50s, early 60s, the cultural activities here were very plentiful, and there were a lot of people taking part.
We never called it the Labor Temple. It was just the hall. It was our hall, and we always came to the hall. Just spent so much time here. Some of the first romances, and
you had Canadian-born young people of Ukrainian heritage who took over the responsibility of conducting the cultural work in the association, which was important because it took a different path, and you had some really first-class musicians and dancers, good dancers, that could develop the work further. And that's what happened during the 50s and 60s.
Participants at the Labor Temple developed a host of other skills as well.
I feel that one of the gifts that I got from being active at the Labor Temple was that we learned things like rules of order in conducting meetings. We learned about managing our finances and organizational skills, that if we were going to have an event, what were the components of that?
There were still many vibrant activities: choirs, orchestras, mandolin orchestras.
I've been playing in the mandolin orchestra here for many years. I started when I was about 9 years old. I like the sound. It's the cultural section, I think, that people really enjoy. And a lot of them have the Ukrainian background, so they like to come here and see our dances and hear the music.
Our attitude has always been professional. We participated in quite a few national festivals. 1946 in Edmonton. Then in 56, there was another big one here in Winnipeg, in the old arena, which we packed, by the way. We have performed on radio, television. We participated in the Manitoba Music Festival. We ended up winning the Lord Treesmuir Trophy for the best adult choir. We poured in and filled it up with champagne, and everybody took a glass and sort of toasted. you have a certain camaraderie in a group like that, people who really like to come, and they achieve all kind of enjoyment out of performing and out of knowing that what they're doing is accepted and that you can even win something like that and be considered the best at that time. It meant a lot.
Political activism at the Hall faced new challenges during the Cold War.
By the time we get into the late 40s and early 50s, and the Cold War is not only really settled in, but we see this incredible level of anti-communism in the United States associated with McCarthyism, the House Un-American Activities Committee. Canada, of course, had its own atomic spy ring.
For most of its history, the Ukrainian labor temple's members were key targets of RCMP surveillance. It was based on the perceived threat that they posed to the Canadian government, and concern that came out of a general fear of radicals and communists in Canada.
The RCMP did go to individual members and to some of the young people, try to intimidate, frighten.
My parents were both high-profile left-wing Ukrainians involved at the Ukrainian Labor Temple. We were told as kids, mind what you say over the phone. Our phone is tapped. And it didn't affect my family in terms of scaring us away from participating quite openly in the activities of the Ukrainian Labor Temple. But I know of people that it did, and who could not get jobs because they would be told, you're a very good candidate for this position, but you go to the Labor Temple at Pritchard and McGregor, so sorry, we can't hire you.
It might have been okay to be a communist in the 20s and 30s. And even in the 40s, when the Soviets were our great allies. But it's going to be a hard sell to get people to want to work with any organization that's associated with the party.
But to suggest that this was simply a communist hall would be inaccurate. It really would fail to capture the vast array of activities that went on here and the type of meaning that they had for those who came to them.
I played in the orchestra starting in 1943-44 when we went and we performed for the army camps. I was part of the dance group later on, but I sang in the choirs and we put on concerts. I later became one of the conductors. And to bypass, to sort of disregard all that and just look at the association as something political, solely political, I think is wrong, is definitely wrong. Sure, there were people who are members of the Communist Party, but that doesn't mean that everybody was a communist in this organization, not by any stretch of the imagination. We didn't grow up like little communists running up and down, and singing the International at the drop of a hat. That didn't exist. That's not what life was like here in our Ukrainian Labor Temple. Once I get started, I just can't stop sometimes.
But there was also tension within the Labor Temple movement over the question of the movement's relationship to the USSR.
At times, when there was really well-taken criticism of the things that were, that people involved with the hall were just going, oh, that couldn't be happening in the Soviet Union. We don't believe that sort of thing. Well, maybe they should have listened.
Mixed into that, the debate around what was called the Russification of the Ukraine came to the fore. So that becomes a debate. within the local membership of the Ukrainian Labor Temple. Because what are they going to do? They are very committed to the Ukrainian roots, and the leadership is committed to the Soviet Union.
Folks, regardless of where they fell on their support or lack or criticism of the Soviet Union, those people still came to the Labor Temple.
I think that the change that came in Canada in terms of the discourse around multiculturalism in the 1960s that emerged, they were very much a product of that social context, and they became much more involved in having a public face that was less so an overtly political one, but being very much engaged in very public displays of the expression of their Ukrainianness in Canada.
In the late 1980s and early 1990s, one could witness a real intensification of interest in the history of the hall.
There was a growing awareness of the need to preserve the history of this building.
We don't want to lose these cultural traditions. We don't want to lose the dance, the music, the language, the literature. We want to preserve those things.
And I can remember them, for the first time taking me through the hall and into all the different nooks and crannies. And what a revelation. There were hundreds of manuscripts, of letters, of documents. They had films that had been shown. All the publications, the thousands and thousands of publications had been printed in the Labor Temple. All of that was there. As I became enthusiastic about what they had, they became enthusiastic. And they wanted to see it preserved.
I personally have been very much impressed with the way in which the folks here at the hall want to preserve the memories and to document the involvement of Ukrainian Canadians.
There is so much of a rich history here, and of course others are working, in a collection of books. We've applied for grants. We've cataloged our films, and so it's not lost. And I guess I think there's so much to be proud of.
It's now a preferred place to host cultural events for everyone, not just for the Ukrainian community.
Young people come primarily for Ukrainian dance. We still have orchestras and choirs.
I've put together a script, and we've set it in rural Manitoba about 100 years ago, showing people who have come to Canada and who are working hard, and it was a great deal of fun to bring down the old backdrops and to search around to find pieces of sets and things like that, and then to improvise and create the set that we're creating for this. So there's been a great deal of enthusiasm, and we've had a lot of fun.
Times change.
It's not as vibrant as it once was. It can't be. It's a different time, a different place. But it is this incredible site of memory.
When one begins to think back on the theatrical productions that were put on, the musical, the concert performed by their own orchestras, the films that were shown there, it's a remarkable place, and it's certainly worthy of being recognized as a historic site.
In 1995, the Manitoba government designated the Labor Temple an historic site. A designation from the city of Winnipeg followed in 1997.
And then after a lot of research and organization and petitioning, it was finally recognized as a National Historic Site. By that means a site of significance to the entire country. Doesn't mean that everyone has to agree, with the politics of the temple. But as a Canadians, it is important for us to recognize this is the way Canada was built. This is the way these people adapted to life in Winnipeg and into Canada. And their contribution has been, in my estimation, unquestionably a positive one.
And it stands as a testament to the ingenuity, the agency, and the determination of those early generations of Ukrainian migrants to not only find a place to express themselves as Ukrainians in Canada and share their culture with their children, but also to ensure the preservation of their own dignity in the face of some very real challenges.